So let's look at this Giannis situation. I don't know if you guys are informed, but recently Giannis said that there is a possible chance that he leaves Milwaukee. Now, he didn't obviously say it in the manner of, oh, I'm leaving and you guys can't stop that. But he basically said that like in the future, there is a possibility, right? And let's talk about it. So Giannis has recently, he said it many times that he doesn't really care about leaving his team. He's loyal to Milwaukee and he wants to be a basketball great. But I think that every great at one point in their career has thought about leaving their team or has thought about, maybe switching from one team to another when stuff gets hard. And that's just a part of the game. I mean, if you've spent 7 years with a team and they haven't done anything for you, and it will kind of feel like you're wasting away your career. But this causes, people to talk when you say stuff like this. And in my opinion, this comes just from losing, right? And losing really is what makes it be pronounced, right? Because when a team is, they're winning, like the Denver Nuggets this year, they have nothing to worry about, right? Like, yeah, Bruce Bowen left, but that's money reasons. And yeah, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., all of those guys are pretty happy on their team. And when you look at all of that, you just go like, oh, that's beautiful. These guys get to be happy, get to be paid, they just won a championship. But there is another side to it. Just as there is a team which is building up and growing and loving themselves and just won, there's another team which has to go into a full rebuild because they could, like the Utah Jazz, because they just couldn't take it anymore of losing every year in the playoffs to the same teams. And this is really where you start seeing superstars requesting trades. I know we always look at the superstars as the bad guys in trade requests, and we always look at them as greedy and selfish, but there's a lot of truth to the statement that there's a lot of stars who wouldn't be half of the players who they are now if it wasn't for them being traded to a different team. And we could say that about all-time legends, and we could say that about players currently. Like, look at the second and third best player of all time, according to most people, right? Which are LeBron and Kareem, right? Most popularly, it's that. LeBron and Kareem both needed to get out of their original team just to be successful. And I'm sorry, but they both won at least one championship with their original team. But they won one, right? With Kareem, he won it as soon as he came into the league. But then they failed to put pieces around him to maximize him as a player. And with a guy like LeBron, they didn't put anything around him. So he had to leave so they could get assets and then come back, right? So he could win the championship. Both of these guys would have not been top three players if it would have not been for them leaving their team. And that's a truthful statement. Like, I'm sorry, not every player is Kobe, Jordan, Bird, Hakeem, who just managed to stay on one team for most of their careers, right? And win with one team, and that's their legacy, right? So when we look at those guys, the superstars, and even though players want to be like them, there is something to be said about that. Yes, you need your original team. If it's for development, if it's for winning, if it's for whatever you need it. Even if it's just to draft you into the NBA, but that's not the team that you have to stick with, right? Like, there are players who we've seen who could do it, who their original team is the team who's going to carry them, who knows what to do and knows what's best for them. Like, look at Steph Curry with the Warriors, right? But as we look into history, right, we could see other players which needed to get out of the situation just to have success. Like KG and Gilbert Arenas said this, that KG, Kevin Garnett, could have been better than Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan is widely regarded as the best power forward of all time. And Kevin Garnett had the skill, the clutchness, and the mentality to be better. But the only thing that stopped him from being better were his teams, right? Like in In the first half of his career, he was in Minnesota. They got to the playoffs every year, but it didn't matter because the team was trash. They didn't know how to build. No one wanted to be in Minnesota. And it caused Kevin Garnett to have to leave to Boston, right, and make himself a new path for his career when he finally had a competent team around him. And then that caused him to, win a championship in its very first season, if I'm not mistaken, there. So he won. Imagine if he would have gone to another team before going to Boston or afterwards. He could have probably won 3 championships, 4 championships, and it would have costed him nothing just leaving a team and moving. But he's making millions of dollars, so I imagine that moving for championships and accolades isn't that hard. In my opinion, that's just one of the examples, right? When we look at history. And it has caused us to look at legends differently today due to this fact. Like, we look at Charles Barkley and we say, oh, he's ringless. But Charles Barkley was an MVP player who got his team to the finals. He was extremely clutch. And he was one of the premier players in the league. But now we don't even talk about him. You know why? Because he didn't win. Players who win get talked about. Players who win are the ones who we mention forever. A championship will cement you in history or make you a forgotten player. The difference between having a championship and not. Like, if Dirk would have never won that championship, we probably would have never been talking about Dirk. We probably would have been talking about, oh, he was a great player, but he never managed to do it in the playoffs. He got smoked by LeBron and D Wade, and the Heat twice beat him, and he was a great player, but we would have forgotten about him. And that's what I say, and that's what leads me to say that championships are number one in history. Michael won 6, he's regarded as the GOAT. LeBron won 4 as the best player, regarded as the GOAT. Kareem won 6 and was the best player in 2, regarded as a top 3 player ever. And you see other players like Bird, Magic, and these are the players who we talk about when we talk about greats, right? I'm sorry, but no one's sitting there in their right mind going up to a table and saying, oh yeah, you know who the greatest player of all time is? Karl Malone. No, Karl Malone had MVPs. He had points. He knew how to score. He's great on the all-time stats lists. He's great on all of the all-time rankings in terms of efficiency and how he played the game and the way that he impacted his team. And he's up there when it comes to being one of the most effective players and, great players when it comes to skill and what they did on the basketball floor. But absolutely nobody will talk about Karl Malone as if he's a top 3 player ever, because he doesn't have rings. If Karl Malone would have beat Jordan twice, Karl Malone would be considered one of the greatest players of all time. He would be up there with Hakeem, KD, and all of these guys, right? It's the same thing with KD. KD had to leave to make his own path and win championships. Kawhi had to leave to be able to win another championship. And yes, he had to leave because, I'm sorry, after what happened with the Spurs, there was no way that they could make that heal. And in my opinion, this just shows you history. Giannis is now maybe the next player. Not every player is supposed to win by their own accord. Not every player is Kobe, is Jordan, is LeBron. And yes, that 2021 championship was good, but the Bucks and Giannis 2021 championship was extremely lucky. Like, I love Giannis, but if we really think about it and we really think about what was the biggest storyline that year, it was injuries. Harden got injured. Kyrie got injured, right? Anthony Davis got injured. The Suns had injuries. The Nuggets had injuries. I think the Celtics had injuries, if I'm not mistaken. And every single team that season had a major injury or something that caused them to not be able to compete at their full potential. And the Brooklyn Nets were the closest thing to winning from that. The Clippers were supposed to win that year. So when we really look back and we say, can Giannis win another championship with Milwaukee? We have to say, who is he facing? Because he hasn't been able to do it. And should this cause him to leave his team because he can't win?